Welcome everybody. In this video, we are going to talk about answering the question, is your baby sitting but not rolling over? And maybe why there are some underlying causes on what could be causing that. So if that is you or you know somebody in this situation, definitely make sure to drop any questions that you have, whether you're catching this live or on the replay, in the comment section, and I'll make sure to answer those and to address them either live or on the replay. We're also going to go through my newest book, Tummy Time and Learning to Roll, for ambitious parents and pediatric healthcare providers to help babies learn to roll independently, and how you would utilize this book to help answer this question on, hey, why is my baby sitting up by themselves but not rolling over? And also, it gives you access to a free online video course that will walk you through all of my strategies for rolling over back to belly and belly to back, so that you can kind of start troubleshooting, hey, what exactly is the block here? I know my baby has gotten to the next milestone, the 6 to 9 month milestone of sitting up independently, but what is maybe holding them back in that 3 to 6 month milestone, which is rolling belly to back and back to belly? For all of the parents who aren't sure, babies roll from their back to their belly around 4 to 6 months, and babies roll from their bellies to their backs around 3 to 6 months, 3 to 5 months. And if a baby is not rolling by 6 months, it is recommended that they receive pediatric physical therapy, either through an evaluation or a screen, and potentially ongoing therapy to help those babies master that milestone. The milestones do build on each other, and we're going to go over that today. So there is a lot to unpack here and a lot of potential causes why a baby might go straight from tummy time to sitting up independently. So if you are catching the replay, definitely check the timestamps below, and I'll make sure to update that to make sure that you guys have the different things that we talk about, so you can jump to the section that feels the most relevant to you. So let's talk about rolling specifically. So rolling is a plane, or is a movement that occurs in a plane that is the rotational plane. So when we move as humans, as adults, as babies, as littles, you can move in one of three planes, and oftentimes you move in a combination of the three planes. When we do things like kick a ball, throw a ball, run, we're oftentimes utilizing multiple planes at once to string together different movements to create the bigger picture, which is getting the ball from our hands into the catcher's mitt, or from going from completely standing still with 2 feet on the ground to a full out sprint to get to an end goal by a certain amount of time. For babies, that can look like going from tummy time, which is a static position, similarly to standing 2 feet on a ground, to a dynamic position, which is going from their belly to their back or their back to their belly. Rolling specifically happens in one of the harder planes of motion, which is the rotational plane. So if you think of the three planes of motion as forwards, backwards, side to side, like I'm a little teapot motion, and rotation, like you're holding a pizza on a pan and you're going to go give it to somebody to your right or to your left. So those are the three types of motions. And the rotational or transverse plane, so again, this plane is the plane that rolling lives in the most. Now, it does add in the side to side plane, and it does add in the forward back plane as well, but to slightly lesser degrees. So if babies are able to sit up but not roll, sitting up is a static position that's more similar to tummy time. You're not really necessarily needing to move, at least in the beginning stages of sitting up. You're holding yourself in one stacked position against gravity, and maybe you're playing with toys in front of you, so you can bend all the way forward, grab a toy, and come back up. That is the forward backwards plane. That is also the easiest plane of motion to develop because you're using a lot of your extensor muscles, so the muscles on your back, and you are using your core muscles to do the forward backwards plane, but oftentimes you can kind of take the demand off the core muscles and lock your pelvis out, so you don't have to use it as much in sitting as you would in rolling. With rolling, you often have to go from your back, bring both arms to one side, engage all of your core muscles, fight gravity as it tries to push you back to the ground, and get into your side, and then coordinate a bunch of different little movements to get yourself on your belly. When you're going from your belly to back, you have to fight gravity with the back neck muscles to lift your head up, push through your shoulder muscles. So if you have tightness in the front of your chest, that's going to be difficult for you. And then you're going to have to rotate again using that transitional, that I'm like having a brain meltdown, that transverse plane or rotational movement. So you push from one elbow, rotate open, and roll over. So oftentimes we find babies who are only sitting are again using that forward backwards motion more than the rotational plane. Now, in those babies, my first question would be, do they have a mobility block or tightness that is limiting their ability to go in the rotational plane? So I would want to look at mobility first. So if you go into the book, again, it's linked in the description as well as in the pinned comment, and you go to how do babies roll from their back to their belly, or how do babies roll from their belly to their back, I would honestly pick one, whatever one seems to be maybe the easiest, start there. You're going to go, so if rotation is difficult, both options are going to be limited, but you may find that one direction going belly to back is easier and one direction going back to belly is easier. So when you support them going from belly to back, is there one direction where they are kind of more fluid than the other? Then go with that direction first. We want to kind of build babies up so that they are not just jumping off of a cliff into like this pool of hard tasks, right? We want to be able to start small and build on that. So start with the easiest direction so they're not like completely fighting you, and then you'll be able to build on top of that. So in this book, you're going to be able to find the checklist, and that's really where I would start. But at the bottom of the checklist is upper and lower trunk rotation and side bend equal in both directions. So that's going to be the mobility component, and that's going to be the component that looks at rotation. And so when you look at that, you're like, okay, I have no idea what that means, Dr. Baker. So you're going to go to the exercise section. And strength is first, just so you guys know. You can also go to the table of contents and tell you exactly where to go. I'm just going to go through here. So you've got neck mobility exercises first. Sometimes when babies push through their elbows to lift their head, they have tightness again in the front of their chest as well as the front of their neck. So if you have tightness there, being on your tummy is going to be more difficult. And so you're going to really want to rule out, can my baby or a baby that I'm working with, can they extend their head and neck? So can they do the guppy pose or back bends on the stability ball? Can they tolerate that? And if not, I'm going to start introducing these stretches at a small pace to their tolerance to make sure that we have the flexibility that we need through the front of their chest and their neck. So for a baby that is struggling, is like maybe like this, they don't want to relax that head backwards. Again, in that guppy pose, you're going to start 5 to 10 seconds. If they cry, 1, 2, 3, all done, come out of that position. Go back into that position. Try to get 1 to 2 minutes total per day minimum to try to increase the length of the front of those neck and chest muscles. Okay, then we're going to go to arm mobility. If we have a hard time in tummy time pushing through those elbows, we need to have flexibility through the front of the chest. We need to be able to easily bring our arms above our head, out to the side, and hug ourselves. So we want to rule out, is there any shoulder mobility restrictions by doing these motions? The next thing you want to do is, if they have good head control in sitting, because they can sit, you're going to probably start with the sitting up upper trunk rotation. I do like that one. I feel like it really gives you a pretty good understanding of where the rotation goes. So again, the book clearly lays this out for you. And then there's also a video in the free online course. And so you're going to try to see how far does this go to the right, not pushing past any resistance. How far does it go to the left? Like, even for me, left rotation is more limited. It just stops earlier than right rotation. I can go further. So rotation is important because you need to be able to rotate those shoulders to one side to get the arms over when you're going back to belly. And you also need rotation when you're going belly to back to push off of one elbow. If babies are struggling with upper trunk strength because when they're in sitting, especially if they're not using their hands on the ground, maybe they skipped prop sitting, they might have weakness in these shoulder girdles. If that's the case, you want to go back to these tummy time positions, even if they're 7 months, 8 months, 9 months, where you feel like maybe tummy time we're past that. If they're not independently rolling belly to back and all in both the directions, so over their right arm and their left arm, and they're not rolling back to belly over the right arm and their left arm, so 4 rolling directions. If they're not there yet, you want to make sure to strategically play and to have these exercise interventions in those beginning stages to make up the gaps that maybe you're seeing in difficulty with rolling, even if they're a little bit later. So you can still play in tummy time. I mean, you can have a 7-year-old, if they have a neurological diagnosis, playing in tummy time. You can have a 12-year-old who's typically developing but is struggling with handwriting, playing in all fours or a crawling position. So these functional play positions are not necessarily age specific. They're just functional for babies and for kids, and honestly for adults. Like, even in yoga, you're in tummy time in the cobra pose, right? So there's benefits throughout the lifespan of a lot of these functional play positions. So the biggest thing I would say that you're going to want to look at if a baby is sitting independently but not rolling in either direction is trunk rotation mobility. That's the first thing I would want to look at. The next thing I would want to look at is that mobility of the head and neck and trunk. So we're looking at neck mobility, shoulder girdle mobility. Can we bring our arms out in all of those different positions? Upper trunk and lower trunk mobility. So can we rotate both the upper half of our body on the lower half of the body and both directions at the same time? So those are a lot of the mobility components. And then once you feel like, hey, mobility is good, it's equal in all directions based on the exercises. So you do the screens in the book and then you go to the exercise section. You do the exercises in the book. Then I'm going to go to strength. Because when you have mobility limitations, you're not able to access fully the strength that you have. So if I have my bicep is strongest in the 50%. So if I'm carrying groceries, I want to kind of keep my biceps and my elbow bent around mid-range. I don't want to hold groceries out with an extended elbow because that's going to be a lot of weight on my shoulder. And I don't want to hold them right here because my my bicep muscles are not strong enough because it's too short. I don't have enough range to really functionally contract those muscles. It's the same thing for babies. If a baby has a ton of tight muscles, they're not going to be able to utilize the strength that they have in a super effective manner. There's more information on that in the chapter titled, let's see, where is it? Mm-mm-mm. And the 4 pillars of movement, and then the 2 methods to increase mobility. Let me see if I can read that to you guys. 161. Okay, so yeah, so in the mobility section, so there's the 4 pillars of mobility, and you're going to have strength, mobility, endurance, and task specific exercises. In the mobility section, it's going to go through why it's so important that babies have both flexibility and strength and the ability to activate those muscles in an appropriate length. And why that's so important is, again, because we want babies to not have tightness and to have equal range in both directions so that they can then use the strength that they have. So I would focus on mobility first, rule all of that out, and then go through the checklist for belly to back rolling and back to belly rolling. I would pick the one that is the easiest first. You feel like you're closest to mastering that one. I would start there, get them rolling in that direction first, and then go to the harder direction and go through those checklists. Say, okay, is my baby able to pull their head up and look around, equally rotating side to side when they're on their tummy? If not, I'm going to go to the tummy time section in the book, and I'm going to utilize those play strategies, helping support their elbows so they're a little bit in front and a little bit to the side of their shoulders so they're in a good position to activate. And I'm going to try to increase their tolerance in tummy time 10 to 15 minutes at a time. The other thing I would say that's very specific to sitting is container use. So a lot of times the baby marketing machine tells us as parents or as aunts and uncles, grandparents, that you need different types of pieces of equipment to help your baby's development and to keep them safe. So those things are like sit me ups, bumbos, um, jumpers, standing activity centers, sit and walkers. There's a couple of those that are actually detrimental. Research has shown us that are actually detrimental to baby development. So absolute no's are jumpers and the sit-in walkers, where a baby sits in a sling and pushes themselves around with their feet. So if you have any of those, toss them, donate them. Whatever. Honestly, I wouldn't even donate them because I don't love them in the universe because they are not great for babies in their overall development. Now, other activities that you want to be mindful of is if a baby is in a container, you need to limit that to 15 minutes max at a time and no more than 2 to 3 hours per day. If a baby is spending a ton of their time in a seated device or in a device at all, even DockATots, they can limit motion. We want babies flat on the floor with a blanket, in a pack and play, in a baby gym, like a baby gated area with a like squishy, safe baby mat. Those things help develop babies' mobility when they are learning how to roll and things like that. Now, babies who are happy sitters, so they can sit independently, oftentimes have struggles with tummy time, may skip rolling, which is kind of what we're talking about today, but they may also struggle with crawling. So the way that rolling helps crawling is that both of those require that rotational component. So when you go from sitting to crawling, you have to bring both hands to one side. Now notice what my shoulders are doing. If I bring both hands to my side, my shoulders are pointing to the right. that means my upper trunk has to move separately from my lower trunk. And so I'm going in upper trunk right rotation, bringing both of my hands on the floor. And then in order to get into an all fours position, I actually have to rotate my pelvis over to get both of my knees on the ground. Now, if a baby is struggling with that rotational component, and the only thing we know about that is, hey, we skipped rolling, that's a huge indicator to me that there's likely a mobility rotational concern. So if we don't go back to try and fill in some of those gaps on rolling, we may see difficulty with crawling. A lot of times, honestly, I see a lot of babies who skip rolling go into booty scooting, and booty scooting is a super, super tough habit to break. And so if I have a happy sitter that isn't rolling, I am hammering rolling as much as I can to help avoid that, right? I want to see where is that rotational motion being restricted and how can I influence that so that once they get to that 9 to 11 month range that is crawling, they are not restricted and starting to experiment with other less optimal ways of moving, like army crawling for greater than like 2 months. Or booty scooting, or even hitch crawling where one foot's on the ground and one knee is on the ground, all of those are going to be less advantageous. Now, babies are still able to move, which is great. So there's levels, right, of this. And so I'm not saying that like booty scooting is the absolute worst thing that could happen to a child. But what I am saying is you might see cascading consequences down the road. Like if you're booty scooting, you're not crossing midline, you're not bringing one hand over to the opposite side of your body. So both halves of your brain aren't necessarily getting the same patterns as a child who is crawling on all fours. If you're booty scooting, you're not getting the same level of pressure through the palm of your hand. So you're not intrinsically strengthening these muscles in the hands, which are needed to create precision motion, like handwriting. So a lot of kiddos who skipped crawling because maybe they skipped rolling, they can have detrimental consequences back like forward in the academic world, like struggles with handwriting because they didn't have the opportunity to practice strengthening their inner hand muscles because they didn't have the opportunity to crawl, because something was blocking that rotational component, and because likely their parents or healthcare providers didn't have this additional education. Okay, so we are going to take a quick break and drop any questions you have in the chat. And I'm going to double check, make sure we didn't get any questions from Facebook, because I know this was a lot of information. Okay, we're good there. Okay. Awesome. So again, if you guys are catching the replay, make sure you drop any questions that you possibly could have. I do just want to say that like this is a huge topic, and a lot of times parents are best will find the easiest experience, excuse me, if they have a pediatric PT on their team. This is some higher level things, right? You have to be a detective, or the PT has to be a detective. Try to figure out what areas of motion are limited. And I don't ever want anyone to do anything they're uncomfortable with. That's why I took so much time to really show you step by step in this book all of the different strategies, the different screens, as well as the exercises that you can safely implement. Plus, there's video for that free course, which is linked in the book or written out in the book that you guys can access for free. But I never want you to do anything you're uncomfortable with. So if a baby is not rolling by the age of 6 months, the best thing you can do is reach out to a pediatric physical therapist to have them put hands on your child, try and figure out exactly what is holding your specific child back. If you don't have access to a pediatric physical therapist, this resource can be helpful for you. I also do online parent consultations to just talk about more one-on-one these specific strategies and how you can implement them, especially answer any questions, because this is a little bit more of a complex topic. But again, just to wrap up, the biggest thing you want to focus on if a baby is sitting but not rolling are these. One, pull containers as much as humanly possible. No putting babies in seated positions, no jumpers, no sit-in walkers, none of that. If you have to put a baby in a device, make sure you limit to 15 minutes at a time. The Upseat and the Ingenuity, I will link those in the description. Those are better options than the Bumbo, just from a postural standpoint. So those are the ones that I would recommend if you absolutely had to put a baby in a device for safety reasons. But better than that is a pack and play, a baby gated area, blanket on the floor, making sure that the baby gets time in all of those positions. The second thing I would do, definitely grab a copy of this book, linked in the description and pinned comment, and go through the checklist so you can kind of figure out where to get started based on how your baby is currently moving at this time. I would say, though, likely you're going to look at upper trunk, lower trunk rotation, neck flexibility, and arm and shoulder flexibility, and then fill in the strength gaps as you see fit. My goal is for parents to use 1 to 3 exercises a day for about 20 minutes and use that over time to build up strength and endurance and mobility in your baby so that they can master rolling. Number 3, if a baby is not rolling by 6 months, a pediatric physical therapist is going to be your best friend, your absolute best resource to get the fastest, easiest results for your child. And number 4 is going to be that you are doing the absolute right thing, right? So you are being proactive. You're trying to figure out why there are some of these gaps. Really still know that there is a value in focusing on rolling, because if a baby skips rolling, they may have struggles with crawling. And so all of this work that you're going to be doing to kind of focus on rolling is almost like pre-crawling strategies, right? So think of it that way. Think of it as, okay, we're sitting independently. That's awesome. Woo woo. But we skipped rolling. I know rolling corresponds with crawling. I know crawling is coming up. So we're going to backtrack and try to fill in some of these areas in rolling so that it doesn't impact crawling, because your experience right now working on rolling before babies get to like 10, 11 months in crawling is going to be so much easier than if you wait for a baby not to be crawling by 11 months, because as they get bigger, they increase more mass. And if there are gaps in mobility and strength, it can be a lot tougher of an overall experience for everyone involved, baby and mama and parent, caregiver, therapist, honestly, to tackle crawling if there's difficulties with crawling than if you were to address rolling now. Promise. So those are all of my tips for helping individuals who have a baby that is sitting up but not rolling. If you, again, because this is a little bit more of a complex issue that we're trying to unpack here, and there are some things that are a little bit more individualized based on a baby's experience, feel free to drop any questions you have in the comments. And thank you guys all for joining me live on this little masterclass. It's about double the length of our previous lives.